Imagine working tirelessly for a year, sacrificing sleep, stress piling up, only to wake up and find that every penny of your hard-earned bonus is gone. Not stolen by a stranger, not lost in a scam, but spent, without permission, by your own husband on a luxury watch he just had to have. No apologies, no remorse, just a smug grin and a, "You'll get over it." He thought I would. He thought I'd let it go. What he didn't know, I was already 10 steps ahead. And by the time I was done, that watch would be the most expensive mistake of his life. I walked into the house, exhausted but satisfied. The past year had been grueling. Late nights, impossible deadlines, meetings that stretched endlessly, but it all paid off this morning when my boss handed me the envelope. A $20,000 bonus. Hard-earned. Mine. I planned everything. A quiet dinner, a small toast, maybe even a short getaway. Just Daniel and me. That was before I saw it. Under the soft glow of the chandelier, Daniel stood in the living room, his wrist raised, admiring something that gleamed under the light. He tilted his hand just enough for me to see. A watch. Not just any watch. Rolex. The box lay open on the table, black and gold lettering taunting me. I knew the model, one of the highest-end releases, limited edition, a price tag that made my stomach tighten. My heartbeat slowed. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't react. Not yet. He turned, grinning, proud, smug. "You won't believe it, babe," he said, rolling his wrist, letting the light catch the surface of the dial. I finally got it. I stepped closer, my hands resting casually on the back of a chair. "It's beautiful." My voice didn't waver. His eyes sparkled. "Right? You should have seen the guy's face at the store. Paid in full, no hesitation. He looked at me like I was a god." He chuckled, shaking his head, completely unaware of the shift in the air. I forced a smile, tilting my head. "Full price?" He nodded. 18 grand, but totally worth it. He admired it again, lost in his own reflection on the glass. "I mean, I've worked hard. I deserve to treat myself sometimes." 18 grand. From our account. I didn't need to check. I knew where that money came from. My bonus had been deposited just this morning. It was gone before I even had the chance to tell him. Something burned in my chest, but I swallowed it down, forcing my fingers to unclench. I refused to give him what he expected. A fight. He was waiting for it. A dramatic reaction. Anger. Yelling. Maybe even tears. That would let him play the calm and reasonable husband card. Not this time. I picked up the empty box, running my fingers over the embossed logo. "No insurance?" I mused. "That's a little risky for something this valuable." Daniel scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Please, I take care of my things." I nodded slowly, setting the box down. He was so sure of himself, so convinced, that I couldn't do anything about it. He saw this as a victory. But he made one mistake. He thought the game was over. He had no idea it was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the shower running. Daniel was already up, humming to himself, probably admiring his reflection in the fogged-up mirror, adjusting his precious watch like a king adjusting his crown. I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, processing. I had options. I could confront him, demand an explanation, make him apologize. But what would that change? He would shrug, flash that smug little smile, and gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. He had stolen from me, and he expected me to get over it. No, that wasn't going to happen. Instead, I took a deep breath, got up, and started watching. The first thing I noticed was how much he admired himself. He couldn't stop touching it, glancing at it, checking the time even when he didn't need to. He rolled his sleeves up higher than usual, making sure everyone could see it. At breakfast, he reached for his coffee slower than necessary, waiting for me to comment on it. I didn't. I buttered my toast, sipping my coffee, glancing at my phone like nothing had changed. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the polished surface of the watch. I was thinking we should celebrate this weekend, he said casually. You know, go somewhere fancy. We deserve it. We. I looked up, meeting his eyes for a fraction of a second before giving him a small smile. Sounds nice. If he noticed, the lack of warmth in my voice. He ignored it. He left for work first, tossing me a quick love you before heading out the door. I watched him through the window as he got into his car, still adjusting the watch on his wrist. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my laptop and started digging. My bonus had been cleared out in one transaction. Straight to the luxury watch store. No hesitation, no second thoughts. He didn't even try to hide it. I checked our messages, scrolling back through weeks of conversations. No mention of money troubles, no hints of saving up. He hadn't earned this purchase. He had taken it the second it became available. I dug deeper. Emails, bank statements, credit cards. And then I found something interesting. A conversation thread with his best friend, Mark. Mark. Dude, how the hell did you afford it? Daniel. Let's just say I had some extra cash lying around. Mark. Damn. Sophia must have flipped. Daniel. Nah, she doesn't know. And even if she finds out, she'll get over it. She always does. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug. He expected me to let this go. He thought I was predictable. I exhaled slowly, my pulse steady. He had no idea he was already standing on a trap, one I was going to let him walk into willingly. That night, I let him believe everything was normal. Dinner was quiet. He talked about work, barely touching his food between glances at his watch. I nodded in all the right places, smiled at his little anecdotes, even laughed when he expected me to. He had no idea I had spent the entire day studying him, tracking every careless mistake, every blind spot he had created for himself. And he had many. Thinking of heading to Mark's this weekend, Daniel said, cutting into his steak. Poker. Night. It's been a while. I took a sip of wine, tilting my head. Gonna bet the watch? He laughed, shaking his head. Hell no. This baby stays with me. He rubbed the glass dial with his thumb, pride radiating from his face. Don't worry, I'll win enough to take you out somewhere nice. I gave him a small smile. Lucky me. He didn't catch the ice beneath my words. After dinner, he went to the couch, flicking through his phone. I lingered in the kitchen, washing dishes slower than usual, watching him from the corner of my eye. He was comfortable, relaxed, perfect. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter, stretching my arms. You know, I said casually, I was talking to Emily today. Her husband bought a Rolex last year. Daniel glanced up, mildly interested. Oh yeah? I nodded. Got stolen right off his wrist, middle of a busy street. They never caught the guy. His fingers instinctively covered the watch. That sucks. I twisted my ring, watching him. People get reckless. When they think they're untouchable, he smirked. Well, I'm not stupid enough to get robbed. I let out a soft chuckle and shrugged. If you say so. I saw the flicker of doubt pass through his expression. Just for a second. A crack in his confidence. A tiny seed planted. Good. Finished the dishes, kissed him on the cheek, and headed upstairs. He stayed on the couch, watching something on his phone, still stroking the watch like a trophy he didn't deserve. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I pulled out my laptop and started setting the next stage. The next morning, I executed the second phase of my plan, letting him feel safe while I built his downfall right under his nose. I woke up earlier than usual, made coffee, and even greeted him with a light kiss on the cheek. The normalcy reassured him. He barely glanced at me as he adjusted his shirt cuffs, making sure the Rolex peeked out just enough to be noticed. He was predictable, obsessed with making sure people saw his success. I let my voice soften, keeping my tone casual. By the way, I was thinking we should do something special. You know, to celebrate your new purchase. His eyes lit up as he sipped his coffee. Yeah? I nodded, pretending to consider. What if we throw a little party? Just close friends. A fancy dinner, some good wine, show off your new investment. I saw the exact moment he took the bait. His ego swelled at the idea of people admiring him, envying him. He set his cup down, smirking. "That's actually a great idea," I smiled back. "I'll handle everything." He had no clue that the party wasn't for him. It was for me. The next few days, I set things in motion. I booked a high-end restaurant for Saturday night, one where Daniel always dreamed of dining, but could never justify spending the money. I told the host to reserve a prominent table, somewhere public, somewhere where people would be watching. I made sure Mark and his closest friends would be there. The same people who would be whispering about him within 24 hours. Then I made a call. I dialed the luxury watch boutique, disguising my voice slightly. "Hi, I'm hoping you can help me. My husband recently purchased a Rolex from your store. I just wanted to confirm if it came with a warranty and insurance plan." The clerk politely checked the records. Actually, it looks like no additional coverage was purchased, just the standard authenticity certificate. No insurance, no protection. Exactly what I needed. I thanked them and hung up, my mind already working through the next step. Daniel had made himself the perfect target, arrogant, overconfident, and utterly blind to the fact that his downfall was already in motion. By the time Saturday rolled around, I was more than ready to take everything from him. By the time Saturday arrived, Daniel was buzzing with excitement. He spent half the afternoon picking out the perfect suit, standing in front of the mirror, turning his wrist just enough to admire his watch under the light. He thought tonight was about him, about flaunting his success, about making others admire him. I let him believe that. I put on my dress, fixed my hair, and played the perfect supportive wife. Smiling, agreeing, letting him feel like he was on top of the world. He had no idea that I was about to rip that world out from under him. The restaurant was exactly what I had envisioned. Elegant, expensive, filled with high-profile clientele who valued reputation above all else. The perfect setting for what I had planned. Daniel walked in like he owned the place. He adjusted his cufflinks, made sure his watch was visible, and threw an arm around Mark as soon as he saw him. "Now this is what I call a celebration," Mark said, raising his glass. Daniel grinned, taking his seat at the center of the table, soaking in the admiration. I took my place beside him, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching as the trap closed in. The night went exactly how Daniel wanted at first. Drinks flowed, laughter echoed, and he told exaggerated stories about work and smart investments. He even hinted at a major business deal coming up, something about a private opportunity he couldn't share yet. I smiled. That was my cue. I leaned forward slightly, resting my chin on my hand. "Speaking of investments," I said smoothly, "I still can't believe you got that watch at such a good price." Mark chuckled. "Yeah, man, you never told us. How'd you afford it?" Daniel smirked, rolling his wrist so the watch caught the candlelight. "Let's just say, when you know how to manage your money, good things happen." I tilted my head. "Oh?" He shrugged. "Smart moves, that's all." I let a slow smile spread across my face, then reached for my phone. "That's interesting," I said lightly. "Because when I checked our bank statements this week, I noticed something strange." The table went silent. Daniel's fingers tensed around his wine glass. "What are you talking about?" I tapped on my screen, then turned it toward the table. Displayed on full brightness was the bank transfer, a single transaction, $20,000 withdrawn, directly to the Rolex boutique. Hush fell over the table. Mark let out a low whistle, shaking his head. Someone murmured something under their breath. Daniel's face drained of color. "Sweetheart," I continued, keeping my voice perfectly calm, "would you mind explaining how that was a smart move? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like theft." A flicker of panic crossed his face before he covered it with a forced laugh. "Babe, come on, let's not do this here." "Oh, why not?" I interrupted, my tone still light. "I mean, you weren't exactly trying to keep it a secret. You even told Mark you had extra cash lying around." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Wait, that money wasn't yours?" Daniel clenched his jaw, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape. There wasn't one. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip, letting him squirm. Then, I set the final stage of my plan into motion. The silence at the table was suffocating. Daniel shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around the stem of his wine glass. His usual arrogance cracked, and for the first time that night he looked unsure. I leaned back, resting my elbow on the arm of my chair, tapping my fingers lazily against my glass. I gave him the chance to speak, to defend himself. He didn't. He was too busy calculating, trying to find an angle to talk his way out. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said finally, forcing a chuckle. "It's just money. We share everything, don't we?" Mark snorted. "Man, that's not how marriage works." A murmur of agreement spread around the table. I saw the judgment in their faces, the shifting glances between themselves. It was subtle, but it was happening. His credibility was slipping. Daniel forced a grin, trying to salvage the moment. He gestured to the watch. "Look, it's an investment. It's going to appreciate in value. We both win in the end." I let out a soft sigh, tilting my head. "Oh, so it's an investment?" I let my gaze drop to the watch on his wrist. "Funny. I actually checked with the boutique." He froze. The shift was barely noticeable, a small flicker in his expression, but I caught it. "I called them yesterday," I continued, keeping my voice light, almost conversational. "Turns out you didn't insure it. No extended warranty. No resale guarantee." I took a slow sip of my wine. "So if anything were to happen to it?" I trailed off, letting the weight of my words sink in. Daniel's face darkened. "That's not..." I placed my glass down carefully, interrupting him. "It would be a real shame if something happened to that watch, wouldn't it?" A small, sharp breath escaped him. He understood what I was saying, what I was threatening, and now he was trapped. I leaned in just a little, lowering my voice. "You took from me, Daniel." My expression remained calm, but my words cut through him like a blade. "Without asking, without remorse. And now you're sitting here, pretending it didn't happen." His jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. He could feel control slipping from his grasp. I took a breath, then straightened up, glancing around the table. "But you know what? It's fine. This dinner was supposed to be a celebration after all." I reached for the bottle of wine and refilled my glass. "Let's enjoy ourselves." Everyone else hesitated for a moment, unsure how to react. But then Mark let out a low chuckle, shaking his head as he took a sip of his drink. A few others followed, muttering something about bad investments and bold moves. The mood shifted, not back to comfort, but to something worse: mockery. Daniel hated being laughed at. I saw the tension in his shoulders, the twitch in his fingers. He was spiraling, barely holding on to the illusion of control, and I wasn't finished yet, not even close. Daniel's laughter was gone. His usual cocky grin? Nowhere to be found. His fingers twitched near his watch, a nervous habit I had noticed all week. He wanted to leave. I could see it in his shifting eyes, in the way his shoulders tensed. He was trying to calculate the safest way out of this conversation, but I wasn't going to let him escape. I leaned in slightly, my voice still smooth, still calm. "Actually, since we're talking about money, I wanted to bring something else up." Daniel's head snapped toward me. I turned my phone screen toward the table. Another transaction, another glaring piece of evidence. "I was looking over our accounts this week," I said, tilting my head slightly, "and I noticed something interesting. A large wire transfer. Not to the Rolex store, though, no. This one was made out to something called Titanium Holdings LLC. I glanced at him. "Sound familiar?" Daniel went still. He hadn't expected me to find that. Mark frowned, peering at the transaction. "Damn, that's a lot of money." "It is, isn't it?" I mused, still watching Daniel's expression. He looked like someone had just punched the air out of his lungs. I already knew what the company was. It wasn't an investment like he had probably planned to claim. It was a fake business account, a slush fund where he had started funneling our money without my knowledge. My voice was soft, but the words hit like a hammer. "So, Daniel, Where's that money? He swallowed hard. It's a business thing. Oh? What business? I pressed. Because when I looked it up, there's no actual company registered under that name. No address, no employees. Just an account that's been receiving a lot of money lately. Silence. Tension coiled around the table like a noose. Then Mark spoke, his voice lower. Dude, is she serious? Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned to me, voice forced through gritted teeth. This isn't the place for this conversation. Oh, I disagree, I said sweetly, taking another sip of wine. I think this is the perfect place. After all, we're among friends, aren't we? A few quiet chuckles from around the table. Daniel's face was burning now, his ears red, with frustration. He had never been this exposed before. Not in public. Not in front of people who used to respect him. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. So, I'll ask again. My voice remained steady, unshaken. Where is the money, Daniel? He didn't answer, because he couldn't. And that's when I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. The weight of the silence was suffocating. Daniel's jaw was clenched so tightly I thought he might break a tooth. His eyes darted around the table, but there was no way out. No one was going to save him. Mark exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Man, this is bad. Someone else murmured, That's a lot of money to just disappear. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and clipped. Sophia, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't the time or place. I tilted my head slightly, feigning innocence. Oh, I just thought it was odd, that's all. $18,000 on a watch, then more money quietly moved into a fake business account. I turned to the rest of the table as if seeking their opinion. Does that seem like responsible financial management to you? Mark let out, a short laugh shaking his head. Daniel's nostrils flared. Enough. He was unraveling. I could see it in the way his hands clenched, the way his breathing deepened. He was losing his grip, his carefully constructed image crumbling right in front of him. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice just enough for only him to hear. What's wrong, Daniel? You were so confident a moment ago. You love the attention. Why not enjoy it? His lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time that night, I saw something new in his eyes. Not just anger. Not just frustration. Fear. Because he finally understood. This wasn't a fight he could win. Not with charm. Not with deflection. Not with arrogance. I had cornered him, and he was starting to realize just how deep the trap went. He tried one last attempt to control the damage. He exhaled, forcing his voice to sound measured. All right, fine. Maybe I made some questionable choices with the money, but this isn't as dramatic as you're making it out to be. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? So how much money is left? His mouth opened, then closed. Because we both knew the answer. I gave a small, knowing smile. That's what I thought. More whispers from the table, more sideways glances. I could almost hear the reputation he built slipping through their fingers. But I wasn't done yet. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a neatly folded envelope, sliding it across the table toward him. You'll want to open that. He hesitated. Then, cautiously, he picked it up and unfolded the contents. His eyes flickered over the words, and for the first time that night, his face turned pale. Because staring back at him was a printed copy of a formal legal notice, a motion to freeze all joint accounts, a petition for financial separation, a perfectly executed paper trail ensuring that he would never touch another cent of mine again. I watched as realization dawned on him. Every account we shared, locked down. Every asset we co-owned, protected. I had been preparing this for days. I had consulted with an attorney, gathered every transaction, built a case so airtight that if he even tried to fight back, he would only bury himself deeper. His hands shook as he set the papers down. I leaned in, just enough to whisper, checkmate. And for the first time in his life, Daniel had nothing to say. Daniel looked at the papers as if they might burst into flames in his hands. His fingers twitched at the corners, but he didn't turn the pages. He already knew what was written inside. I took my time. Swirling my wine, watching, waiting. The tension at the table had shifted from curiosity to full-blown discomfort. No one was on his side anymore. The men who once envied him now looked at him with pity, amusement, or worse, disdain. Mark cleared, his throat breaking the silence. Damn, man. She really played you. A couple of others chuckled, low and under their breath. Daniel's hands curled into fists. This isn't funny, he muttered. I let out a soft laugh. Oh, but it is, you see, you thought I'd let this go. That I'd throw a fit, maybe cry a little, then move on, just like always. I took another slow sip of my wine before setting my glass down. But here's the thing, Daniel. I met his gaze, my voice never rising, never shaking. I'm done playing your game. He exhaled sharply through his nose, nostrils flaring. You're being ridiculous, Sophia. You can't just... I already did. I slid another piece of paper toward him, this time a copy of a withdrawal statement. One he hadn't seen before. The moment his eyes landed on it, his face twisted in confusion. What the hell is this? I smiled, slow and deliberate. Your private little Titanium Holdings LLC account? I tapped a manicured finger against the printout. I moved every dollar back into my name. His entire body stiffened. That was the real checkmate. I had spent the past week preparing, finding legal loopholes, transferring back what was mine, ensuring that if he even tried to touch a dime of our assets, it would be his downfall, not mine. You can't do that, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I tilted my head. I already did. The whispers at the table grew louder. Someone muttered, "Holy shit." Mark let out a low laugh. Damn, dude, she just took you for everything. Daniel slammed a fist onto the table, his face burning red. That money is mine. No, Daniel, it was mine. My voice was sharper now, cutting through his anger like a blade. And you thought you could steal from me and walk away without consequences. He was unraveling. I saw the way his breathing quickened, the panic setting in. He had lost. But there was still one final move left to play. I reached for my napkin, dabbing at the corner of my mouth as if this was nothing more than polite dinner conversation. Then I set it down and let the final piece of my plan fall into place. By the way, I said casually, you might want to check your wrist. Daniel frowned. What? I gestured toward his watch. Go ahead. Take a closer look. He hesitated. His fingers trembled slightly as he unbuckled the strap, holding the Rolex up to the light. He turned it over, and then, his face drained, of all color. Because engraved into the back, in delicate cursive lettering, were the words, "Enjoy your final trophy. S." His breath caught in his throat. I leaned in just slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. It's fake. His eyes snapped. To mine. What? I smiled. The watch. It's a replica. A damn good one, but still a replica. His hands shook as he turned the watch over, inspecting every tiny detail. No, that's impossible. I bought it from the store myself. Oh, you did, I agreed. But let's just say there was a little mix-up when you weren't looking. I cocked my head. The real one? It's already been sold. His mouth fell open. I pulled my phone out and tapped a few times before holding the screen. Toward him. Displayed for everyone at the table to see was a receipt. A private resale transaction. The real Rolex was already in the hands of a collector in Switzerland, for double the price Daniel had paid. Mark let out a loud, shocked laugh. Holy shit. Sophia, you stole his watch. I shrugged. Technically, I just took back my money. Daniel looked like he might be sick, his hands clenched and unclenched. He had nothing left. The money? Gone. The fake business? Exposed. The only thing he had left? The one thing he was so desperate to show off was a worthless counterfeit. I picked up my clutch, calmly rising from my seat. Well, I think that about wraps things up. I turned to the table, offering a pleasant smile. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Mark raised his glass. To Sophia. A few others chuckled, murmuring words of agreement. Daniel just sat there, his entire world crashing down around him. I leaned down one last time, just close enough for only him to hear. You wanted a prize, Daniel? My voice was ice cold. Congratulations. Now you have nothing. And with that, I walked away. Completely. Unapologetically. Victorious. I stepped out of the restaurant, feeling the cool night air against my skin. Behind me, Daniel was still sitting there, frozen, humiliated, and utterly defeated. The whispers would spread, his reputation would crumble, and by the time he tried to salvage anything, it would already be too late. I didn't look back. Instead, I walked to my car, my steps light, my heart steady. I had spent years letting him take advantage of me, dismiss me, steal from me. And now, I had taken everything from him. I climbed into the driver's seat, letting out a slow breath. Then I pulled out my phone and tapped a single message. To Mark. Drinks on me next week. Watch collectors have deep pockets. His reply came almost instantly. Mark. Damn. Respect. I smiled. Game over. 2 months later, I walked past a luxury boutique, glancing at the display window. Another Rolex. Sleek. Expensive. Just like the one Daniel had once worn with so much arrogance. I barely spared it a glance. Daniel, from what I had heard, was struggling. His reputation in his circle had tanked. No one trusted him anymore. His investments fell through, and when he tried to recover, he had no money left to rebuild. And me? I was thriving. I had moved forward, made smart investments, and secured my financial independence. My victory had been clean, calculated, and completely deserved. I smirked slightly, shaking my head as I walked away from the boutique. Some things, after all, just aren't worth the price.